Hi, this is the podcast talking about Islam and mental health and Quran. This maybe is slightly off topic or maybe it's a bit different, but I thought to just talk about the issue of trauma and post-traumatic stress and so forth. It's not something that's actually, I think we don't see that really it's mentioned in Islam sources from what I've seen from the past, but we know that trauma does have a big effect on our lives, and it does affect our iman and relationships with other people and ourselves and so forth. But at the same time, if we learn to deal with the trauma in the right way, we can actually learn from that and become better people in some way. So I don't want to talk about the whole story about what happened with post-traumatic stress disorder, because yes, some negative things did happen, and I was told that I had PTSD before. But at the same time, even if I don't talk about all the things that happened with that PTSD, I know it was not just one issue, it was several. But at the same time, I feel that going through PTSD and going through traumas and difficulties in life, that's actually something that's actually benefited me and has helped me to understand myself more and to see my way or goals in life, to actually formulate my purpose and to see where I am going. Because let's see, when I look back on my past and when I start to see these traumas and PTSD incidents and so forth, it just seems that they're kind of leading me in one way. And not just these incidents, but all of my life seems to be leading me in one way. And these issues have, these traumas, they stick in your mind. But when we wonder, why do they stick in your mind? Isn't there something to learn from them? What can be beneficial from them? So I start to see as well that, okay, maybe I don't benefit so much from these recollections and rememorizing things that happened before and reliving things and just having things go around your head. Maybe it's not so much benefiting me, but at the same time, maybe it's going to lead me to benefit other people. Maybe other people can benefit from these things that maybe have happened with me. So I start to feel that these traumas and issues, they are actually leading me in some way that's going to benefit people around me somehow. And it's actually made me more empathetic with people, and it's actually made me more understanding of other people. Now when I hear about the things that happen to some people, maybe I haven't had the exact same situation. Not everyone's situation is exactly the same, but I have more understanding and more feeling towards them, what they might be going through, than I did before, and a lot less judgment, I guess. For this for this reason, I am a lot more understanding of other people, I think. I mean, before, I did used to have a more negative view of many things that happened to other people, and maybe I would be like many people who tend to think that someone, certain things happen to people because they're just not good people, or just they are bad, or people have caused their own difficulties. And I realized it's just not like that. People don't cause their own problems and they don't want them to happen to them. And at the same time, things happen to us and we don't expect it and we don't really know how to deal with it as well. But people, they just blame us. And I think that's the main issue that happened with, that's why the trauma became a PTSD, for me anyway. It happened because of the reactions of other people. Because one thing I realized and learned is that when someone is going through a trauma or a hard or difficult situation, the last thing they need at that time is someone telling them that it's their fault or they did that and that they should have done something else, or just being really cold and just leaving them at that time, or saying what a bad person they are. I think this was the main reason that made me lose my trust in people. Because, in the beginning, people going through a trauma or a difficult situation, what they really need at that time is someone to give them a kind word, a gentle word, to be there for them at that time. And maybe at a later time, maybe if someone sees that this person has done something that's actually contributed to the problem or caused the problem, maybe find another time later, and when they are calm or when they feel better, then use that time to try and explain gently that, well, maybe you could have done this a bit differently, or maybe next time don't do like that. But when someone is going through a trauma, a difficult time, it's not the time to be telling someone that it's their fault or they shouldn't have been there. For example, if someone goes out of their house and they're walking in the street is a public place for people, right? So why would it be a problem to walk in the street? And what's the crime if someone walks in the street that is public for people? And no one goes out of their house that they want to be attacked or they want someone to steal their bag, for example. So it's not actually logical to tell someone that why were they there? Why were they walking in the street? Why did they let someone steal their bag? They did it. Nobody does that. No one wants to go out of their house and have something happen to them. And people don't want it in their house either. People don't want negative things to happen to them. So it's not logical to say to people that you wanted this or you caused this. And the last thing people need is people turning against them. They need comfort. They need people to comfort them and be kind to them. Say a nice word. I see when people are going through bad experiences, people are just really cold and hard with people, and this is one of the things that's causing this post-traumatic stress, I think, in many people. More than anything, people need time to feel and have people understand them and just have some sort of comfort and relief from that at that time. So yeah, and I guess I didn't mention the things that cause the PTSD normally because obviously if people want to consider what is considered a trauma or what is considered something that might be considered PTSD, I mean, normally people, they see it as a big event. For example, veterans from war often have PTSD. They often go through PTSD after the war. But other people as well, for example, people who may be victims of rape, maybe people who've been victims of violent crimes, people who have been attacked, people who have gone through, that they've seen a natural disaster or a major disaster, car crashes or the house is on fire, or something that's maybe it could harm them, it could kill them, it could cause a big problem. These are the things that are considered to cause PTSD. But at the same time, there are things that maybe don't fall into these categories, and people may have symptoms of PTSD, but not all doctors or psychiatrists are going to say that they have PTSD. There's other terms for things, and obviously PTSD is when things last longer than maybe 3 months or 6 months. The symptoms of PTSD can be flashbacks, they can be reliving the event every day. In nightmares and flashbacks and recollections, and in sometimes avoiding the place, avoiding people where this thing happened, and having very negative feelings towards things. And yeah, this, I suppose that's when I had this issue with PTSD, I was avoiding, not entirely avoiding places, but avoiding some places to some extent. Some places, they seem to have a negative energy, and the places, they bring back the memories of this thing happening there, and people shouting and different things, and at the same time, people as well. And the problem is that sometimes, like I said, when people have gone through gone through a trauma, whether other people consider it a big issue or not, all of us have our limits. Some people, they're more sensitive than others. Some people have better resilience, and other people, they have more fragility. Oh, they are more inclined to be affected by things. So when something happens that's major like that, the best thing is that, if you really want to help someone with PTSD, then, or you want to prevent someone from having PTSD, try to just be there and just listen to them and be kind. Just don't start at that time trying to say something harsh or tell them that that's their fault. As I mentioned, these are the things that make us not trust people and to feel that it's our fault, and then this makes all the memories come back, and we can't talk about the event, and it becomes even bigger in your mind that we can't go to this place and we can't think about that, and panic attacks and flashbacks and all this. Sometimes it's just easier just to say what happened straight away. Just talk about the issue and forget about it. So these are some of the things that can cause it. And obviously, when people want to be relieved from PTSD, some people, they can't talk about it. It is very difficult to talk about this big trauma that people have gone through, especially when they've been silenced or they've had people blame them when they've gone through this trauma. So some people can't talk about it. They find it very difficult to go to a therapist and just talk about it, because they're going to cry, maybe they want to shout, maybe they'll be very affected. So one of the ways that I find is actually more helpful than talking sometimes is just doing some physical exercise as well, because I've read in places that trauma actually goes down into your body, and it affects you, and we can release a lot of this trauma through exercise. For example, running, yoga, doing different types of exercises that can benefit us. But another way that can benefit people with post-traumatic stress disorder is actually surprisingly to just be alone. This is what I read in a book by a woman who had post-traumatic stress disorder as well. She said how although she went to doctors and took different forms of treatment and different kinds of therapy, she said she didn't find anything helped her that much except when she was alone. And really, being alone is very beneficial for this. because if you can sit with yourself and just try to understand what happened exactly, the situation, and to understand that it wasn't you, and maybe even wasn't anyone, maybe it was just something that happened, and maybe it was some sort of misunderstanding, but try to understand what really happened and try to understand what you can learn from this and how to use this thing to continue living our life somehow. Because for me, I find that using these traumas, using these situations to actually to have benefit for people, or to have to do something with it, is actually beneficial. For example, now, although I'm not talking about what happened, I'm talking about some experience from this situation. Maybe someone will listen, maybe, and they will be benefited from that. This is something I feel that will help me. This issue of sharing the information and actually doing something useful with it. Because if it just stays in my head and goes round and round, it isn't going to help, really. So I try to understand these situations. This happened and this happened and this happened, and how to become better, to become a better person. Or maybe you need, maybe if there was some mistake made, maybe you need to learn from this mistake, and then just go forward and continue your life. So being alone and having time for reflection and time for time to understand yourself and what happened, these are very beneficial for people who, for people like me maybe, and others who've gone through something traumatizing, how it can benefit them. And the other things that can help, I've paid a lot of attention to my diet as well, because I like to use diet therapy, and I've done courses in nutrition, and I find this very helpful as well, because you don't have to talk about anything. People, maybe they're too busy. We don't have to worry about people judging you. But decreasing cortisol is something important, because obviously when you can't sleep in the night, when you have too much cortisol, it just causes problems in your body, and this affects our health. So I find trying to keep my diet healthy and try to include a lot of foods that have magnesium and B vitamins and vitamin C and zinc. These are important nutrients that deal with stress and depression and so forth. So I find, I take the tablets for nutritional yeast, and I find this is helpful to calm you down, because there's one doctor, Dr. Berg, he says about, for example, vitamin B1 is very useful for people who worry a lot, or for people who have panic attacks. But I've also found that B12, they've used B12 a lot to treat different types of depression and anxiety and so forth. And liver was used a lot before, by nutritional therapists and so forth to deal with various mental problems, because liver is very nutritional in B12 and in all the B vitamins, and it has zinc and iron. And low levels of iron can lead to feelings of anxiety and fear and so forth, which we don't need more of them. If someone feels that they are traumatized, they don't need to feel more fear. We should feel less fear, but increasing our level, eating foods that have B12, for example, liver and so forth, maybe once a week is enough, or less than that, should help us, because we need to keep the levels of iron up, and B12 and nutrition And then there's worship and ibadah. The problem is that people, when they have trauma, when even people who feel depressed, they feel that it's very hard to do things like praying or reading the Quran. I mean, the concentration goes. This is what has happened with people, with even myself, for example. Maybe you want to read Quran, you want to make zikr, you want to do something, but you're just remembering that this thing happened. And you're just getting upset about this thing happened and just going round and round. But I find that sometimes you just have to kind of start with that. And being alone is very beneficial for this thing as well, because when you are alone, and if you close your phone, and if you just try and, close your door, close everything, when you are alone and there's total silence, if you are able to do that, of course, because not everyone can have that opportunity, but if you are able to have some time like that, you can find that maybe at that time you are able to do some remembrance of God, maybe read the Quran. And this is very beneficial as well, because Allah has given us a lot of promises in the Quran about and gives us many stories of the things that happened to prophets, and gives us glad tidings that if we are patient, we will be rewarded, for example, and reminds us that life is a test. And this is one of the main things that has actually made me okay. When I knew that, when I know that these things that happen, they are for a reason. They are like a test in our life, and they are not necessarily a punishment for us. I mean, because many people, they think wrongly. I mean, even I hear people in the mosques, they say this thing as well, that anything that they dislike that happens is like a punishment. But not everything that happens in our life is necessarily a punishment. It can be maybe leading us to something good. And when I look at some of the things that happened, yes, they seem bad and hard and traumatizing, but at the same time, there are many good things that have come from these issues and these things, and it has changed my life and perspective in many ways, because also I did not have a plan to go and learn Quran before having trauma. It was from that issue that made me want to go and learn what the Quran said. And so I learned about religion and Quran from being traumatized, and the Quran itself seemed to explain to me about the trauma. Maybe it sounds very strange to explain like that, but I start to realize the purpose of life, and that life has these issues. Negative things happen, and then good things will happen, and everything is a test for us in our life. And Allah is always there, and He's always with us, and He will always answer our prayers. And I saw that as well when I was in these situations, that sometimes our prayers are answered at that time, just spontaneously. So we should not be in despair from these issues. Allah is always there for us, and if we read the Quran more, it's not just about the sound, because people say that the Quran has a nice sound and it can cure us, but it's about the actual message of the Quran, that we worship Allah, but it's not just about just worshipping Allah and just knowing that Allah is there, but having the relationship with Allah and worshipping Him, out of love. He loves us. If He didn't love us, He would not give us Quran and show us the right way. In turn, I mean, obviously I can't say for sure, I can't talk about Allah and say who He loves and who not, but I think that most people, if they're reading the Quran, Allah has guided them to that. So I think this is maybe a sign that Allah loves this person, and I think it's also a sign if that we love Allah if we are turning back to Him too. But anyway, when I was talking about the issue of trauma, I mean, doctors and psychologists and so forth, they all say that religion helps us deal with stresses and depressions and traumas and the problems of life. And you know, even if people get depressed and they feel difficulty going on, it's you know, it can make it less than it would be otherwise. And I think this is why we don't find so many people who are religious actually doing things like suicide or so forth, or drug taking or drinking alcohol. In Islam, we don't have drinking alcohol or taking drugs or suicide anyway. So our way of dealing with things is to turn to Allah and to trust in Allah that He will make things better and forgive us. And that's important, but obviously some things we have no control of as well, because as I mentioned, I was affected by the way that people behave in the times of trauma, and it's not just myself. I remember someone who told me he was put into prison for something he didn't do. I mean, he was just wrongly accused, or they had some suspicions about him or something, and he was put in the prison for some time. This was in the UK, and when he came out, he was expecting the people he saw in the mosque, his brothers, as he said, to ask him how he was, to be nice to him, to ask if he was okay. But he said no one asked about him, and even they turned away from him and said that, well, you're just you have all these problems. They don't want to be involved in these problems, so they turned away from him. And he said he was very hurt from that, and he felt that these people are like hypocritical people. They just go to the mosque and they worship, but when there is a real problem and a real issue, they're gone. So he's saying these hypocritical people were not supporting him, but he said the only person who supported him was actually one man who was not actually religious. I think he was not a Muslim, but he was calling him and asking him if he was okay, if he needed anything. So he was happy about that, but he was not happy about these people who just turned away from him. And because when you've been through something difficult or a trauma or a difficult time, at that time you need your friends and your family. And this is what psychologists say, that we should have good networks of people, our families, our friends, and those around us. The problem is that in this time, not everyone has this. I think this is why people are becoming more ill, because people are cutting off relationships with people for no good reasons, and turning against people for no good reasons just because they have a problem. I mean, in the past we used to have the idea that a friend in need is a friend indeed. This is what people used to say. But our generation just seems to say a friend indeed is a friend you just have to get rid of. Just block them on Facebook and holos. And that's something that is maybe affecting us negatively. So these are the main things that can help us if we're going through traumas. But just I wanted to make the main point, and that is that not to despair, and also, as I mentioned before, I try now to put these traumas and issues into perspective, and I feel that if I use my experiences and my knowledge from what I what I have, what I can benefit people from these things. Now maybe if I become a counselor, for example, as I wanted to train as a psychologist, as a psychotherapist, as a counselor, now from going through these things, I can help other people who have been through these things and benefit others, and this in turn is going to benefit me. I feel this is where the real maybe the real area of healing is when you're able to fully use these things for the benefit of others. As psychology says, we are social people. We're not supposed to just be by ourselves. We're told many times about self-love. We're taught about many people now, they have this idea about self-love, looking after yourself, dealing with yourself. That's good, but what about other people too? I mean, shouldn't we also have other people love other people, do good for other people, look after other people, and do good to other people as we love ourselves? This is one of the teachings from Islam that we have just forgotten about, and it's important as well. Loving others as you would for yourself. And the Quran actually recommends that we do for others more than ourselves. This is there's a verse from the Quran that talks about the Sahaba who traveled from Mecca, the Muhajirin. They went to live with the Ansar in the Medina. So the Ansar, they gave them half of everything they had, and they let them into their houses without asking anything. And they wanted to give them half of everything they had. And the Quran says that they preferred others above themselves, and they were praised for this. And many of the Sahaba, like for example, I read about Aisha, and I read about Ali and different people. Sometimes they were forgetting that they were fasting, they had to break their fast. So they would just give all their food to some poor person and not feed them. And forget that they are fasting, they need something to break their fast. I think in our time we don't find these kind of people. Maybe you find someone, they might give you half of their food. They will not give their whole food. And I'm not saying that maybe you should necessarily, but we should feel for other people. We are lacking in this now. And the whole issue of loving yourself, I agree that we shouldn't hate ourselves, we should love ourselves, but love other people too. And we have the teaching that love for your brother what you love for yourself. If you would not like someone to do something to you, then we should try not to do it to somebody else. And if we would like someone to do something for us, we should try to do it for them. And I feel that this is the main thing that I learned from these traumatizing experiences. The issue of not to hurt people. It's like really bad. So I guess that's the main thing, that after all of this, it's taught me empathy and not to hurt people and try to be good to others and to use things for your benefit and to try and see the positive in your life. I don't know, maybe I am a kind of dreamy person, or maybe, I don't know if this is kind of like boring, but anyway, I hope that it's been some sort of benefit to someone. And if someone has some sort of comments or recollections or suggestions or something, you can let us know. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.